Hey there, PhD friends, and welcome to another video. In today's interview, I'm talking with Dr. Pavitra Kumar. Dr. Kumar is a food scientist who is based in India. She did her PhD here in the US and decided to move back to India. And I think one of the biggest pieces of our conversation was around that, around being an international student in the US and then deciding to move back to your home country. Because I know, being a former international student myself, that this is a real internal struggle that people have. For some people, it's not as much of a struggle because maybe you made your decision already when you moved to the US to stay here for the rest of your life. But for some people, it really is a confusing and challenging dilemma to have. And Pavitra was really kind to walk us through how she came to that decision, why it was a good decision for her, as well as the skills that allowed her to transition into an industry role back home in India. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview. So one of the best ways to push your career forward is LinkedIn. I am not going to lie, LinkedIn has been phenomenal for my career and I'm constantly singing their praises. They're not a perfect platform, I'll be the first to say that, but they're an excellent platform. And so I have a free training I did where I shared 3 tweaks you can make to your LinkedIn profile today that will help you stand out to recruiters and to other opportunities on LinkedIn. So check out that training. The link is going to be in the description. Let's go ahead and get into the interview. Hi, Pavitra, and welcome to the Bold PhD series. So excited to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Hey, G, thank you very much for taking this initiative out to help connect prospective or current PhD students with those that have already seen the grind, those that have seen the light at the end of the tunnel, people like you and me. I'm Pavitra, and I currently live in India, in a city known as Pune, in the western part of India. I received my undergraduate degree and master's degrees in biotechnology and food biotechnology, respectively, from India. And then I worked with a food company in India for around 3 years. After my master's degree, I wasn't very sure if I really wanted to go for the PhD degree, or should I take a break and figure myself out by working in an industry if I would make the fit or if these things are meant for me. So I worked in a company where I got an opportunity to meet a lot of people who had PhD degrees, and honestly, they gave me a lot of confidence and motivation that this is something I should explore. And being from India, I always had a tiny dream of trying to explore living in another country for a while, trying to meet people of various other cultures and backgrounds, and trying to learn to live by myself for a bit. And that's how somehow my road ended up in the USA. So I studied in Washington State University for PhD food engineering. Pullman, Washington, very tiny, but a very happy college town, I would say, literally in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, life was there for 4 years for me. So that's how I ended up in the US for a PhD degree. And after 4 years, I had to pinch myself to tell myself that the degree is done and you have 2 letters prefixed to your name. Because as you might have been through it too, you go through a lot of unbelievable moments, right? After which I I worked in the US in Buffalo, New York for about a year, and I always kind of wanted to be back. So I thought it was time for me to be back home in India where family is. And I moved to a job in India. And right now I work with a food company in India. So that is about what I've been doing for the last 10-ish years of my life.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that story. And thank you for also sharing the story of an international student in the US who did move back to their home country. Because I think most of the time people wonder, as international students, when they come here to study, the challenge is, do I stay? Do I go? Are there opportunities back home? There's always that internal dilemma, right? And so, for speaking to the international students that may be watching this, how did you deal with that internal dilemma of, do I go? Do I stay? What was, I guess my question is, what was something that helped you decide? Because I know it's a real struggle.
It is, right? All of us have been on that side of the line for a bit. So, to be honest, when I left India to the US to pursue my PhD or to start my PhD degree, I was definitely confused and in the middle of too many things, as all of us go through when we step into a country, very multicultural. You see people who have had so much more exposure than you, with different cultural backgrounds, and you're trying to grapple with a lot of feelings. And the one thing that I would tell people is don't force yourself into decision making in the first year. Just absorb everything from the weather to the accent to the language, the culture, and the way grad school is structured is very different from what each of us has been through, right? And you're suddenly in a completely mixed age group where you have people from so many different walks of life, people in the 20s, 30s, 40s, all of them so passionate to do a PhD. So uh, the one thing I would tell people is don't ever beat yourself up into deciding in the very first year whether you like the country or not. Just breathe, experience, and be kind to yourself. And at the same time, one thing which I always was very sure about was not to base my decisions on what other people wanted to do. You may have friends who just love living in another country. You may have friends who love different things about different countries. And not everybody goes through the same life as you do. You have to live your everyday life. You, me, everyone. So better don't come to decisions because XYZ said this is a brilliant decision to stay back. So that was one thing I did. And the one thing I told myself very clearly was I'm going to take this graduate school journey one step at a time. Because going into graduate school was more like peeling an onion. You see so many layers to it. The more you step into it, oh, I did not know there was a preliminary examination. I did not know there was that going through hell, also known as qualifying examination. I did not know I had to write papers and get them peer reviewed by people in the community. You kind of know they are there up in the air, but when you actually go through them, there was a lot to learn. And it also made me realize the things that I could actually do 5 years before. I wouldn't even believe that I could do these things, just like a lot of us out there. Followed by which I thought, okay, now let me try to go and do an internship in a company in the US. And that's when the real struggle of what it means to be an international student trying to seek an employment role in the industry. That's when the reality opened up for me. One very good point that helped me was I was never hell bent that I will stay. I was never hell bent that I will come back. I just thought I'll take it one step at a time, and let me just try interning in a company. The internship gave me a very good break from the regular graduate school work that you do. You're all of a sudden working with new colleagues in a new city. I got to explore the East Coast. I got to see so many cities. You try to learn so much about how the industry works in your own domain and things like that. And having worked in India earlier, I had a good reference point of working in your own home country versus working in a foreign country. It's never India versus US. It's always for all of us. It's our country versus where you're not a citizen yet of that country, right? So those things happen. And then I got back to grad school, tried to wrap up. Surprisingly, as I told you, pinching myself, I wrapped up my degree. And of course, it was a roller coaster ride of emotions, of learning, of unlearning, of failing. And then one day you just get up there. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this series will agree with me if they're going through it. Trust me, guys, there is light at the end of the tunnel and you can do it. Please never second guess yourself. Please never doubt yourself over such moments. And followed by which I got an offer to work for the same company as a full-time employee. And that's when again I went back and I took it once again, one step at a time. And as I kept working there, I kind of got a very clear picture of how else I would like to live my life. And I am very grateful to the US for giving me those brilliant 4 years of my life. I wouldn't have my life the any other way around. And so many wonderful human beings from so many parts of the world doing the same domain as you, doing different domains as you, going through a lot of cultural and other personal turmoils and making it through. And it's just been the best. And slowly towards, as I finished around a year at that particular job, I got a better picture of how else I would want to live my life. And for some reason, immigration was not there on the list of things that I wanted to do. And it was more about, okay, the world is one place. Let me just go back home and, work in India. I know that India is known to be a very chaotic country because we're just too many people cramped up in one space, and social distancing always goes for a toss. But I did miss the color and the culture and the vibe and a lot of things about the country too. So possibly because for me, immigration was never a priority. It was more about trying to get some international exposure, and I'm glad that the US found me because it's literally a melting pot of cultures there. Countries you might have just seen on the world map, you actually see people from there and you make friendships with them for life. And a lot of them are still friends with me. They're still in touch with me and we're still there for each other. So that's how I could kind of put my thoughts together. And whenever I ran these thoughts in my head, like, hey, do I go back? I did have a lot of people telling me in 1 year that do not go back. In the other year, they would say, oh, you should go back. And the third type were the best. They would just say, even I'm confused, so don't ask me. So that's when I realized, like, okay, this is the standard immigrant confusion dilemma. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then I realized that my drive, or the whole passion to become a citizen of another country was not very strong. So when you do not have a very strong drive to do something, you're not going to push yourself to do it, right? So then I felt, okay, rather than being here and screwing up my own peace of mind as well as involving a lot of people for something where my heart is not 100% into it yet, just do it right then. I honestly did not time it that I should leave the country 1 year after my PhD or something like that. It was just on the back of my mind that someday I want to be back. But I realized, like, if you do not have the hardcore drive to, become a citizen of another country, you're not going to work yourself through it. Every single form I was signing, every single paperwork I was doing was becoming very burdensome. I call it the I series within my friend circle. You know that too. All internationals keep filling up I-20, wait for the I-20, and then it goes on until I. So
Yes.
when is the next I form coming?
Yeah.
That was like, oh, this sounds worse than even trying to write a journal article, for some reason. Maybe because it wasn't my inclination to that very strong level. So yeah, all these points together kind of put me back here. And I did have some fears when I was trying to come back to my own country. I'm not going to bluff around that portion because I was more like, I'm definitely going to miss a lot of amazing people I've met in that country. And I'm definitely going to miss the space on the roads and, miss meeting people from different walks of life in different parts of the world. But then there's also a certain part of the world where I really want to go belong to, and until the end of my life, possibly. Yeah, and also the other thing that I've commonly noticed in a lot of international students, they have this one fear that if I give up on the immigration chain right now, the series of battles that you have to do to win the final war, if I give up at one stage right now, I may never possibly able to come back, and that ends up draining the energy and they focus on one thing, where you see careers going for a toss, unhappy people, at the same time staying away from family in foreign land. Things are not easy, sometimes in the middle of a pandemic and a war and whatnot. So I know it's very easy for me to tell, but one thing I told myself was, don't fixate your thoughts around this process that if I miss the F1 STEM OPT, I'm never going to become a PR or a citizen. So you never know how things are going to come back in life to you. You never know what can surprise you anytime in life. So if something is making you truly unhappy and killing you from the inside, please take a call, keeping your own self in mind, because once you lose your will to live, it becomes very difficult to survive the whole series of battles that you have to win.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You shared so much wisdom. And I think the first thing I want to thank you for sharing this, because like you said, like you rightly said, because I was an international student as well. And there was definitely everything you were saying I could identify with, because yes, I've been through that feeling of, well, I'm not completely happy. My family is so far away. Do I really want to live in the US for the next 20 years? Do I, at this point, I've been in the US 19 years. So that's par for the course at this point. So, that ship has sailed. But, I know exactly what you were talking about that internal battle. And I love the fact that you said that don't fixate on it, right? Just go, you essentially, you lived in the moment. moment and said, I'm going to enjoy today, and I'm going to enjoy tomorrow, and I'm going to enjoy the next day. And when I get to that bridge, I'll cross it. I think that there is a place for you to plan and think ahead, but I love your approach as well. I think another thing too that, and now I'm even forgetting what you said, because there was something that you said I really wanted to come back to. Okay, I'm sure I'll remember it, but I love what you said about don't fixate on it, and don't also think, if I miss this chance, I'll never get it again. I think that that's a very limited mindset to have, and I totally recognize that a lot in a lot of immigrants, because I think sometimes a lot of people, or a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but there's a percentage of international students that do come from countries where the economies are not as great as the US or something like that. And so there tends to be that limited mindset of, oh my goodness, if I don't just do this right now, I'm missing my chance, I'm missing my opportunity. And, and all of those feelings that are associated with growing up in a developing economy, or an economy that's not as strong. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure it's going to help some international student out there. So right now you work in food biotechnology, correct?
Food science, I would say. It's a huge umbrella, and all of us sound the same to a lot of people. So
yes, food
science.
I
work with food science. Yeah.
Food science. So for the PhDs listening, maybe they're in academia right now. They don't want to necessarily work in academia. They would like to work in an industry setting like you. What would you say? I know you said you had your background, when you got your master's, you worked for a little bit in the food industry, and then you went back home to work again in that similar industry. So for the people that want to do that, because I know one of the things about academia is that sometimes again, limited mindset, we think we cannot leave academia as PhDs. So what's your take on that?
That's a very relevant question that you've asked, because it's another conflicting emotion that graduate school puts you through. Do I continue to stay back in universities, or do I get out of this and get into an industry, or do I do something else that's very different, very interesting, like you, for that matter? I just love the career path that you have chosen. So things like that. So the first thing I would say is that don't go by skill sets, go by the nature of these jobs and what they demand, and figure out if that is something that you definitely can give for the rest of your life, or at least for a bit. For example, from my little understanding or little experience of the US university life, it's amazing. You learn a lot. It's like an ocean of knowledge. You just lost there. I call it the great golden poverty period. You don't have much money, but you're so happy for some reason. It's so nice. It's like you're paid to think, you're paid to make mistakes, you're just paid to pay your grocery bill and your car insurance possibly. But it's such a happy period. I kind of wanted that to continue for life, and I had all those conflicting thoughts in my head. But what happens is in academia, especially the process how it's structured in the US, it requires a hell lot of rigor, even more than what you need in graduate school. Sometimes as a postdoc, sometimes as an assistant professor, an associate professor. It requires a hell lot of rigor that you have to go through. Every career has its ups and downs, but in this case, you are just dedicated to the science or the field that you are working in, right? And you have to deal with students. So that's very tough. Even in your other work spheres, you can always say, I do not want to have reportees. I don't want to be a people manager. But here, no, you actually have to deal with students, It requires a lot of patience and things like that. So if that is something that you don't want to do with, it's completely okay. Once again, don't start thinking low in terms of yourself that, this is not something I can do. So that doesn't make you less of a person or less of a PhD degree holder. And once you decide that this is not meant for you at any stage of your PhD, and please trust me, sometimes this realization happens to people during the postdoc. And then they come and tell me it's too late for me. And I'm like, no, it's not late. You're not dying, okay? You just did a couple of years of postdoc after PhD. You figured out that this is not meant for you, because the idea of you or the definition of you keeps changing. What I was when I started my PhD, I definitely am not now. So if that's the case, I would say that start looking at interning with the food industry. or if you feel that you do not qualify to be an intern because you're no longer a student, look for a contract or a temporary role. You can also be a part of project roles in any company, in any industry in your field. You don't have to be in the best company that makes the best product or that's the best in your domain. For example, if you're into computer science, it doesn't mean you have to be into an ABC company that's the best in your field. Go to some place and go with a very open mind. Do not expect anything. Don't even double check yourself, like, will I suit this company? Don't think of anything. They've given you the role. That means they trust that you can do something about it. Step in, be very open minded, and see what best skills from academia training that you can bring them. There's always space and scope to use the skills you got during your PhD in your industry role or in your non academic role. That's sadly something that's ingrained in a lot of our heads, even during grad school, that hey, you'll be working with say a robo, you'll be working with a telescope, and these things are not going to happen in the industry. The skills that you learned now are going to die. I won't even say they're domain specific skills. You master the art of patience in a PhD. You learn to deal with failure at the worst possible level, and you wake up with anxiety attacks every single day. So what more does your mind and your brain and your possibly your heart, what more do they need to grapple with? You go through moments of self-doubt in those years, right? Even if you're doing whatever, be it a liberal arts PhD, be it a science PhD, be it a non-science PhD, anything, right? You go through that entire series of emotions and you learn to deal with it and you see hope. One personal change I felt was I've become a very optimistic person at work. You'd come and tell me, like, can you make an apple out of a mango? I might even say, like, let me try. Become like that. So you just become very optimistic because you see pathetically low levels of failure where the data doesn't listen to you, right? And what am I even working with? All of us, regardless of what our majors are, what our fields are, and this grueling series of examinations and trying to go through peer pressure. There is a lot of peer pressure in PhD. No one's going to disagree with me. And sometimes peer pressure expresses itself in very, very weird ways, which is hard. It's grown up adults who have forgotten to grow up and then they put together in a PhD. So see what skills like that you can bring into. And all of us deal with long-term projects, long-term work, which we learn to split into shorter tasks, and we become more organized through the course of our PhD programs. So put all those skills to use and work there for a couple of months. Get into a reflective mode and do not go by what the rest of the world would want to tell you. Get into a super reflective mode, introspect, figure out if you are happy doing whatever you are at whichever workplace, whichever city, country. Don't go by your titles and things like that. Are you happy doing that from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.? You may not always meet the best people in your life, but did that work give you a feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of accomplishment that I have done something to the world I'm living in? Take that further and then try to get fully well into a full-time role in a bigger space. And you'll definitely see how the skills that you've learned through your PhD are going to help you. They're going to help you for life. And they didn't put DR in front of your name for fun, right? They know that you can take situations. It just teaches you to deal with a lot. So I always say that the DR is not for a subject expertise, but it's for that emotion control that you learn in those 4-5 years. Or there are people who end up with it for 7-8 years. Dr. G is like, I've been through that. Look at her. So it's that part. So in one line, take the next opportunity that helps you transit. Speak out to recruiters. No one's going to say, I don't want to hire you because you've been in academia for too long. It happens very rarely. Go there and just go with a very open mind and figure it out yourself. Honestly, no one has it all figured out.
Nobody has it all figured out. So there are a few things I'd like to touch on. I remembered the thing I was going to say earlier on, and it was about values, right? You talked, when you were talking about your experience as an international student who went back, you talked about you have to consider your own values, and you have to not be driven by what other voices are telling you. And I think that's really, really essential. That what kind of life do you want, right? You have to really sit down and think about, what kind of life do I want? Do I want to be surrounded by family and friends? I remember in grad school, I met this one professor that had gone to our school, and he had gone back to, I think he was, I forgotten where he was from, but he had gone to Dubai. He left the US to go be a researcher in Dubai or the Emirates. And when I asked him, he said it was because I wanted to be closer to my parents. My parents were getting older and I wanted to be closer to them. And so all of these things are really important to consider, that like you said, in a foreign land, you don't have family, you may not have family, you may not have many friends. Even I find that at this point, the other day I was thinking about it, and I'm like, most of my friends are from college and stuff, and we all live in different parts of the country. So it's not easy, right, to really develop roots, and you have to take that into consideration. Another thing that I want to touch on that you mentioned right now was introspect. And I love to use that word so much, is you really have to sit down and think. And I think that this is something that is really not taught in graduate schools, or it's not really taught in the educational system. That sit down and think and ask yourself, what do I want to do? What do I really want to do? Do I really? And I think that when I came to that realization, I didn't want to be a research professor. It sounded nice. It sounded like somebody else's dream, but it was not my dream, So yes. And so really, really understanding that, it's maybe your friends are saying that it's a great dream, but is it your dream? I think that that's really important for you to sit down and consider. And you mentioned that. And also, yes, getting a PhD is all about resilience. I feel like more than anything, this is what every PhD has, is just pure. If you didn't even even if you didn't publish papers, whatever, you are going to get resilience out of the experience. So absolutely love that. And so thank you so much for sharing so much on that. So for people that want to, so I know you've shared so much, right? People should self-introspect, resilience, consider their values, all of these wonderful things in choosing a non-academic career path. Any last few words that you have for somebody that wants to do exactly what you've done? They are currently, and I know you've shared so much, but maybe some few last words that you want to mention for those people that want, the international students here, they want to come back home and do something meaningful in their own country, and also consider their own values and around family and around being around the culture that they're familiar with. What would you say to them? I think you said so much, but I was wondering if you have any more words.
For sure, yeah. I see a lot of hesitancy in people, can I go back to my own country? Will I find it difficult to be accepted back there? And one thing I would tell them is, did you have this hesitancy when you left your home country? Did you ever question yourself, will the US accept me? So don't ever get that thought back into your head. It's where you grew up, okay? It's a home. For everybody, home is a very different thing. So if you want to go back, be very clear on when you want to go back. Take that decision and base it out on a lot of other factors. I did a lot of writing in my notebooks to see what was going to work and what wasn't. And I, of course, did a lot of ranting to poor people who had to put up with me. So if that helps, that definitely will help. And be very practical in your approach. You know what you've experienced, you know where you'll be going to, you know what your home country has and what your home country does not have. So be very practical in that approach, and never close your mind. You know, the more open your mind is, the more life welcomes you with opportunities. So if you're somebody who wants to go back to your home country, you definitely know that there are things that would work in your favor for your personal life, and that's why you decide to go there for whatever reasons. You do not become anything less than a person who decides to continue to live in the US, because we are all living our lives. And in today's super globalized, super open worlds, for example, I never thought I would meet you, right? If not for LinkedIn and for the amazing posts and all the activity that you keep doing. which I should mention really deserve a lot of appreciation. So in a world like this, you can always remain to be connected. The work you do, regardless of where you do it, can always have a global impact because we are all connected by the
Yeah.
same problems. That's what I feel. So don't ever close your mind, and the same open-minded nature with which you stepped out of your home country, always step back. The world's one sphere. You never know what's going to connect, what's going to bring back, and be willing about it. And kindly don't put your happiness around the place where you live in. Please do not do it. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the globalization that we're currently going through, or it's been going on for a while, but I think the pandemic especially helped to bring that to the forefront, right? Where now there's so many places that have great internet, they have great resources, just like most, places that we see on the television and want to go to, and there are opportunities that are springing up in these places. And as PhDs, I feel like we're poised more than ever to take advantage of all of the world happenings, right? No matter which corner of the world that we're in. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Pavitra. If somebody wants to get in touch with you and chat with you about your own career path, where would they find you?
They are definitely welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and my email ID is available on LinkedIn, open to public, along with my contact number. So they're welcome to text me, call me, email me, or send me a LinkedIn message. More than welcome to be a sounding board for a lot of people, whoever, wherever you are. And on another note, if you are somebody who has to take a strong decision of continuing in the US for your own personal reasons, as you mentioned, situation back home, everyone is born with a different type of privilege. So if you are somebody that way, also please don't consider yourself stuck, because live the life and make the best out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation.
Same here. Thank you for doing this amazing series. I got really excited to sign up for this because I went like, oh, I've never been on a recorded YouTube session and no one's ever done this. So, I should do this. And I just love all the posts that you keep putting out, such a source of motivation, because for a lot of us who've been through a lot of ups and downs during grad school, as an international candidate, especially, this is going to be very useful, the kind of amazing work you do. And I wish that, life lets us meet sometime beyond our screens. And anytime, I would just like to hope that we collaborate more and more. And the world needs more people like you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. All right. Thanks, Pavitra.